I'm sure by now you've seen it on YouTube that many people are calling for the end of the US dollar, that it's going to collapse and be gone tomorrow. Just one thing to keep in mind is a lot of people who are pushing this narrative inside of the investing sphere are the same kind of people who have been saying that the economy will collapse every single year since 2009.
So the dollar's just going to go down. And so once the dollar breaks through, this support level, I think it's all over. I think it's going to be like a hot knife through butter. And if people don't understand what's going on, look around the world at all that smoke, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire. Everywhere, is the dollar going to stay the reserve currency? Are there secret meetings going on with the oil exporters to dump the dollar? Look at the new reserves. Numbers coming out a couple days ago. The dollar was only represented 1/3 of net new purchases of foreign reserves. 2/3 were mainly euro and Japanese yen. I mean, it's all over the world, right? That this is going on. And it is going to happen. And it's not going to happen. Most people think this is something that's going to happen in 10 or 20 years. No, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen during this Obama administration. I don't think there's any chance that we can drag it on longer than that.
And if you had listened to those people, you'd have missed out on the greatest bull market of the 2010s. But it can't be denied that there's news all around everywhere, whether it's on Twitter or in the investing sphere, about countries moving away from the US dollar. So in this video, I'm going to help you explain what's happening, why this is happening, and how you can react to it. So first, let's take a look at the big picture. So starting from 1999, just on the turn of the millennium, the US dollar was 72% of all of the global reserve currency, and if you fast forward to today, it's down to 59%. And so you can see this has been going on for a long time. Now obviously there's been a few dramatic shifts recently. This is part of a greater, larger trend, and isn't necessarily something to be overly concerned about. I don't think anybody can deny that we've gotten a lot richer and a lot more technologically advanced since 2000, and so if the US isn't the majority of the global reserve currency, that seems to be just okay. But one thing that is interesting is very recently, it isn't the euro, it isn't the yen, it isn't the pound, it's other currencies that have soared from just over 1 to 2% to now 10% of the currency that is used in trade. Taking a look at Russia, which is really the prime mover behind all of this, Russia was recently sanctioned and effectively cut off from the US dollar, and they had, for example, their international assets seized. According to the IMF, Russia has now 33% of all of its reserves in the Chinese yuan. And so naturally, this is going to make a lot of countries want to hold the yuan because so many other countries are adopting it as well. There's going to be a runaway effect. One thing many have pointed to is that recently there's been a few major transactions that have happened in the yuan, and one of these is between China and France. So they recently completed their first liquid natural gas settlement in the Chinese yuan. And so people are saying this represents the end of the petrodollar, because typically energy and oil is purchased in dollars, and this happened between China and France. It represents only a small fraction of France's imports for liquid natural gas. If you read the article, you can see it was 65,000 tons they purchased in yuan, but overall France imports 25 million tons in total, so this is a very small percentage, representing only 0.26% of their natural gas imports, which were purchased in yuan. I think this Reddit post sums up best about the situation and whether or not you should be concerned. Nothing is going to replace the dollar as a reserve currency. What is increasingly happening is that countries are signing up bilateral trade agreements in their own currency. India, China, Saudi Arabia, and other major countries are doing it. This will reduce the need of the dollar reserves among countries. The dollar will exist as the favorite global currency, but most countries will also do significant bilateral trade with their own currencies. Technology can now easily enable this. And also, here is another thing that people don't want to admit. The US's sanctions and ability to cut off Russia from international markets, freeze its $300 billion in assets, spooked many countries, especially in Asia. If the US can do that to a country as large as Russia, they could do it to anyone. Countries did not care as much when it was happening to Iran and others, but now it has spooked many countries. Nobody wants to give the US that kind of leverage against them in the future, so they are all setting up trade deals to trade in their own currencies. This will only increase. China has $2 trillion in USD reserves. You think China looked at how Russia's $300 billion got frozen overnight and think they are fine? They could lose their $2 trillion in reserves with the sign of a pen by the US president. China is the largest trading partner to 70% of countries in the world. They are now pushing countries to accept the yuan. India has moved all of its oil purchases and trade with Russia to the rupee. They are doing this with the UAE, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. India is the third largest energy importer in the world. They are now signing free trade agreements with the UK, Australia, and want to use their local currencies for trade. The other major event is the US is tightening their interest rates. US raised interest rates faster like never before, and this has nuked many economies worldwide. The dollar suddenly became very strong, and countries are struggling to maintain balance of payments and shore up dollar reserves. Look at Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and others. Their economies have been devastated and imports have stopped because of the dollar's strength. Smaller countries are now realizing how much they are beholden to the US Federal Reserve's decisions. This kind of dependency is now very apparent as interest rates are being hiked by the Fed after a decade of super low interest rates. It's not a good thing to be so dependent on a foreign country's reserve decisions. People who say the Chinese yuan will replace the dollar or some other currency will replace the dollar are wrong too. Nothing will replace the dollar, but what will happen is that more trade will be done in a collection of non-dollar currencies, especially between large trading countries. So there you have it. The attack on the dollar is entirely a product of international relations and geopolitical affairs. This could easily be turned around, and just because the dollar is under attack doesn't mean it's going to go to zero overnight tomorrow. What's happening is that the United States got into a fight with Russia, and so as a result they had to sacrifice some of the credibility of the US financial systems by putting on heavy sanctions against Russia, and it's in every other country's interest to hedge their bets and make sure that can't happen to them. And also because this isn't 1950 or 1889 anymore, technology enables countries to do more and more deals bilaterally in their own currencies. The US could easily repair its reputation by ending sanctions, loosening on them, or improving relations with their partners across the globe. And also alternatively, they can improve their relations by not exporting so much inflation through high interest rates onto the rest of the world. So there you have it. While there's a lot of attention being brought onto the dollar and how it's under siege right now, it doesn't mean it's going to collapse completely to zero tomorrow. That's all for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.